want us to talk about some of the most common soft tissue injuries. And we know that the most prevalent soft tissue injuries are those of the lower limb. So around 25% of all injuries are lower extremity, whereas for the arm and shoulder region, about 21%. So, and aside from that, we've got 30% or 29% for the head and neck region. So they're probably the three most common areas that you see injuries in rugby league. Maybe just starting purely with soft tissue injuries, so sprains, strains, that kind of thing.
Okay, soft tissue, you're talking more like muscular. So you'll be talking about calf injuries, hamstring injuries, and quad injuries, such as rec femoris injuries per se, and groin injuries sort of thing. So what you're also noticing is that players are getting bigger, they're getting stronger, they're getting faster. Yeah. So the size of the players now, they're huge here. They're stronger, they're faster, they're training more, sort of thing. So you're starting to see it's all about pushing those limits, get them fitter and faster. And they're trying to speed the game up. In the NRL, all the rule changes, they've got 6 games, they're taking out penalties and with pauses in play just to get the game faster, get the game faster, get the game faster. And this is going to start taking its toll. You've got collisions, you've got and involved with that collisions and repeats, etc. So, yes, you probably are seeing more soft tissue injuries. And then again, but you're also trying to counter that with your recovery and load management during the week to reduce those. But you've got to do a certain amount to make them strong enough and resilient enough to get through the games.
Okay, and in terms of management protocols that you would go through for someone, say one of your key athletes with a say a torn hamstring, how would you go about managing this player? Obviously, in the initial stages would be applying ice compression, elevation, those kind of things.
Compression is probably more important, I found, getting the right compression than the ice. Ice is good as an analgesic, so to reduce the pain, but you want to reduce the swelling so much, and I find compression is the most important thing. No movement, no stretching whatsoever for the first 72 hours. You're just seeing the inflammation process take place, new collagen fibers being laid down. You don't want it to disrupt them. You wouldn't use any anti-inflammatories for the first 72 hours. You could perhaps start using them 72 hours post. Then you start with some gentle strengthening, maybe some isometric gentle strengthening of that limb, get them moving and walking. Look at maybe some cross training they could do, cycling. They can still be lifting their upper body weights. They can be doing arm ergs, that sort of thing. So you start trying to maintain their fitness while you start to build the muscle, and you start to mold the new collagen fibers, sort of thing, by incorporating isometric contractions. Some gentle concentric, eccentric contractions, gently moving your way up from there. And you're going through each phase. So, you've got to tick this box at this phase before they do this, this, and this. And you do clinical testing along the way, see how they're progressing.
There's some research published last year, a systematic review from King and Associates in Sports Medicine Health Science. What they did, they had a pooled analysis of match and training injury incidents in rugby league.
Yes.
And so this study is an update from 2014. And some of the interesting statistics might be interesting for people listening to the podcast, but one particularly interesting statistic for me was that the hooker playing position has the highest match injury risk of any position at hooker. So 93.1 injuries per 1,000 match hours. Is that a surprise to you, or is that?
It is a little bit, because anecdotally, Matt Ballin was one of our most consistent players and hardly ever injured until right at the end of his career. And I think that's more when he went to I think he went to West Tigers or somewhere else. But he hardly ever had an injury. He was Mr. Consistent, Mr. Professional. He did everything right, and he was fantastic. And I think also post him, Epi Coruscant, when he was there, man, he was very resilient and very good. He had a couple of think of little ankle injuries or calf injuries, but he responded very well. And he was, for the amount of tackling and the amount of work they did, I actually anecdotally say no, right? They were, for all the stuff that they did, they had less amount of injuries than some of the other positions. So I find that kind of interesting. I mean, Heath Lestrange was the same. I don't recall him having a great deal of injuries or long-term injuries at all. Yet they're right in the middle doing everything.
Yeah. Do you think, and correct me if I'm wrong in this train of thought, but considering that the hooker is always around the ruck, whether that be at the play the ball or making tackles out of marker, that the impacts are a lot lower for the hookers?
Yeah, I think that might be the case because they've got less distance between them and the opposition.
Yeah.
They're also not running at such a speed. They generally take a couple of steps or a step from dummy half. They might have a scoot from dummy half, but they're not exactly accelerating at a max rate or hitting it into full stride very often. They're tackling around the ruck a bit more. It's not often that they're getting them head on from a good 10, 20 meters out, sort of thing. But then maybe their tackling techniques a lot better because they've done so many. I'm not quite sure. Look, Cameron Smith, how resilient was he? How many games did he play? He was hardly ever injured. Hooker, similar thing. So I don't know. I don't see that. I can't validate that stat that you pulled up.
I'll put the link. I'll put the link to the papers in the show notes. So anyone who's listening that wants to scrutinize that paper and have a look at it. Let us know what you think on our socials. Send us a comment, or I'll probably put this up as a little bit of a clip on our Instagram and Facebook so people can share their thoughts. One of the unsurprising statistics for me was that the lower limb continues to be the body region with the highest injury risk of around 64.5 injuries per 1,000 match hours. And the quadriceps was the most reported injury site with 28.5 per 1,000 match hours. The incidence of concussion in studies reporting on rugby league match injuries increased 7.7 versus 11.6 per 1,000 match hours. So that was from 2014 to 2022.
I think that'd be interesting. That's as you would probably expect, but I think also the reporting and the guidelines for concussion have become tighter than previous from, prior to 2014. And so they're probably getting reported more because if you have a look at some of the headshots that went on prior, those games prior, you're like, that can't be right.
Yeah.
We know some of those games prior in those earlier games. So I think they're just more aware of the concussions and reporting them more. And they've become stricter as to what is a concussion or what isn't.
There is actually some more research that I looked at before we came on this podcast, but around 22% of players accept the fact that they don't acknowledge concussion symptoms.
They don't self-report.
They don't self-report when they experience them on the field.
Yes.
And it says here concussions took around 28 days to recover, which conflicts with the concussion sport statement that reported 80 to 90% of all concussions recover in 7 to 10 days. So do you think that our protocols in place at the moment are suitable given the nature of the sport?
I think those goalposts are always moving, and they're moving towards the extended layoffs now. I know in junior sport now, with my sons playing junior sport, it's 3 weeks mandatory stand down now for any concussion. So that may be passed on up to higher levels.